Thank you, Kevin, and hello, everybody. As Kevin mentioned, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not here as a legal scholar, nor am I here as a political strategist. So although at the end of my remarks, I can address some questions you may have about what's legally happening at this contentious time in our country in regards to abortion, my focus will be more personal, and it is through that lens that I will share the 5 things we all should know about abortion. Before I begin, I want to highly recommend a comprehensive resource which some of you may have watched live, I think last week. It was a webcast called Life Beyond Roe. Did anybody watch that? You can still access it, and there were about 40 plus leaders, including Ryan Anderson, that I believe sits on your advisory board, addressing what's next for the pro-life movement after the Dobbs decision. It's long, it's about 2.5 hours, but just put it on and you'll be amazed at how much you learn in that time period. I truly appreciate your coming here today, especially because ever since Dobbs, ever since even before Dobbs was leaked, it seems as if all we are hearing and talking about is abortion. It reminds me of another time in my life in the early 70s as the Roe case was dominating the airwaves. I was 16 and had just returned from Mexico City where I had gotten an abortion. My parents thought I was in Chicago, of all places, at a journalism convention, which they allowed me to go to because I was on our yearbook staff. My pregnancy in 1970 was a result of the first time I had sex, and I had it with a boy whom I had begun a relationship with in grade school, and that was in St. Paul. We were attending separate Catholic all-girl and all-boy high schools at the time that I got pregnant, and it was a pregnancy that was confirmed at a free clinic in downtown St. Paul, where I went with 2 girlfriends from my high school, all in our parochial school uniforms. As we were leaving, a nurse ran out to us in the parking lot and handed me a slip of paper with the name of a local man who took groups of women to Mexico City for abortions. My pregnancy, well, I decided what to do about my pregnancy right there and then on the spot. Lacking awe about the things of God, the humanity of my child never crossed my mind. It was tissue which I needed to rid myself of because I certainly didn't want to tell my parents, and I didn't want to have it interrupt my schooling or my social life. My boyfriend came up with the money, and I came up with the plan. However, what I didn't anticipate were the after effects of my abortion. When I returned from Mexico, I insulated myself from what seemed like a constant conversation about abortion. By the time Roe was decided a couple of years later, I had no reaction to the ruling. My emotional blinders were on so tight that all through college and even law school, I was able to avoid most conversations about it. I also began to avoid everyone and everything connected with my abortion. I broke up with my boyfriend. I generally started to hang out with a wilder crowd. Particular places were painful for me to even drive by, such as the free clinic in downtown St. Paul, but also my grade school, and of course, my high school. So after graduation, I was looking forward to leaving town, leaving the state, and went away for college, returned to Minnesota for law school, and there I met my husband at my first legal job. Fortunately, once married, we had to live in Minneapolis because my husband was an elected official. He was the district attorney, and as Kevin stated, I was a prosecutor for the county. So we worked and socialized with professional people who were strongly pro-choice and very politically active, many of them serving in elected offices for the county and the state. It took me years before I told my husband about my abortion, but otherwise I kept it to myself. It was my deep, dark secret. I was uncomfortably quiet about my beliefs because I did not know what they were. My conscience was cloudy. Mother Teresa would say it died along with my aborted child. I still experienced an almost subconscious sense of shame over what I had done. I eventually did tell my mom about my abortion, and she never brought it up again until right before she died. I was taking her to a radiation appointment, and she simply asked me if I had dealt with it. And with my mom, I knew she meant, had I dealt with it before God? I basically blew her off. But after she died, the weight of her question, which I now view as her parting gift to me, laid on my heart and stirred up my soul and brought me to prayer, which eventually led me to seek healing for my abortion. After sharing the story of my 37-year-old abortion with a priest who was also a counselor, he told me that the depth of a trauma can be measured by the extent we go to keep it a secret. He described our sessions as spiritual psychotherapy, treating a deep wound in my soul. I was able, through that process, to acknowledge my child after years of denying her, finally seeing her as a person whose life was unfolding within me. I repented, I mourned her death, and I would commend her to God at an upcoming retreat. For confidentiality purposes and safety concerns, the location of the retreats are kept private until right before you go, and there are a variety of venues for the retreats. The first indication that this grace-filled experience was going to be tailor-made for me was when I got the address and learned that the retreat would take place directly across the road from my high school. I overcame my fear and attended anyhow, arriving on a Friday night. On Saturday morning, a small group assignment had us individually going back to our rooms, our sleeping rooms, to make a list of people we were mad at over our abortion. I wrote down me, my boyfriend at the time, my parents who were drinking heavily at the time of my pregnancy, and I also wrote down the nuns from my high school because in my adolescent opinion, I thought they should have seen that I was in trouble and should have come to my aid. After completing the assignment, I was returning to my small group through a private stairwell when I ran into a sister, a religious sister, a cloistered nun from my high school who had walked across the road for Eucharistic adoration. We were alone on the stairs, going in opposite directions, and she recognized me. After 35 years, she called me by my name and inquired about my mom, who had died shortly before the retreat. She had no idea I would be there. The retreats are totally private, and plus I had formalized my first name and acquired a new last name by marriage. She had come to pray for all of the retreatants, but I know that God had sent her there to help me as I dealt with the hurt and anger of being abandoned by those whom I wished would have been there for me when I was 16. Her presence and loving attention was such a personal gift of healing to me, I could hardly take it in. When I got back to my small group where we were going to share what our assignment, I actually asked if anyone else had run into anybody on their list. And no one had. When it came to the part of the retreat where we were able to name our child, I chose the name Mercy because I was incredibly immersed in an ocean of it. Bishop Robert Barron's definition of mercy really spoke to me and still does. Mercy, he says, is what love looks like when it turns towards the sinner. A year after my retreat, I had the courage to attend my 40th grade school reunion. I don't even know if they had them before then. And see people I had been avoiding most of my life. I did not know if I would see the father of our child, but when I did, there were always people around him, including his wife. And a group of us decided to take a tour of the old school where the reunion was being held. And I have no idea, and they joined in. And I have no idea how this happened, but at the end of the tour, I found myself in a musty kindergarten courtroom, face to face with my old boyfriend, whom I hadn't seen since we were teenagers, and no one else was around. It's like the rest of the people had moved back to the gymnasium. He casually asked me how I was doing, and I explained, I've been healed from my abortion. He looked at me and earnestly replied, I am so sorry for all of that. As I accepted his apology, I literally saw a weight lift off his shoulders. And I realized that this healing was twofold. And I learned not long after the reunion that he had died. Now, as promised, I told you I'd get to it, Kevin, the 5 things we should all know about abortion. We should all know that an abortion hurts babies in the womb and most everyone else connected with it. Since my retreat 15 years ago, I've become a team member for the Rachel's Vineyard Ministry and have observed the pain people are in upon arrival. And this includes moms, dads, grandparents, siblings of aborted children, as well as relatives and friends who facilitated it, doctors and other medical staff who recommended it, and some who performed and assisted in it. Teresa and Kevin Burke, the founders of Rachel's Vineyard, which is the largest ministry in the world for emotional and spiritual healing after abortion, recently had this to say about the end of Roe. Abortion intimately wounds women, men, relationships, and families. The failure to acknowledge and heal these wounds has contributed to the poisoning and division of our great country. Let us now begin a time of national healing. Number 2, we should all know that there is much support for women and families who choose life over abortion. With the overturning of Roe, that support is needed now more than ever. I don't think about it too often, but I do at times wonder, what if, instead of heading into that free clinic in 1970, I had had another place to go to learn about my pregnancy and to have a real conversation about my options. And in today's world, these options need to include continued support for moms and families after the baby is born. Also in today's world, it's important for us to demonstrate our consistent pro-life views, acknowledging tragedies in addition to abortion, which are wounding our nation, such as killings in our schools, and murderous rampages in our neighborhoods, as well as tragic deaths at our borders. And I mention this not only because it's the right thing to do as Catholics, but also because we become more credible in our pro-life stance if we apply it across the board. The little girl in me feels like my abortion was a big monster that hurt me. So when people I love and who claim to love me back support it, I feel as if they are on the monster's side. It goes that deep. Attempts at calming my reaction, and I really try not to react very much, by requesting that I respect other people's choices, can't we all just get along, completely misses the mark, since they disregard the humanity of the child in the womb and the subsequent damage an abortion causes. We can and should be tuned into when the time is right to speak the truth about abortion and correct misinformation that is circulating in the public square of social media. For instance, politely reminding people to listen to the medical experts on both sides of the issue, not just listen to Hollywood celebrities trying to be popular. I do know it took me many, many years before I listened to what my mom was really asking me about my abortion. It saddens me she died not knowing I dealt with it. Prayer is powerful for changing hearts and minds, and we may never know of its efficacy. The holy nun who came to my retreat exemplified that. She told me before she died, during a visit, which I was actually able to make to my high school, that she had no idea how significant her prayerful presence was to me in the midst of my healing retreat. 4, we should all know that some people won't listen to what we think about abortion and will often reject us for our views. I learned this almost immediately after my retreat when I naively shared my experience with some of our political friends, including a U.S. senator, thinking they might be interested in hearing from me, a credible professional with firsthand experience of the detrimental effects of abortion. No, they weren't interested. Filled with zeal, I even attended an event at our state capitol with an "I regret my abortion" sign, only to be ignored, or at least pretendedly not to be seen, by a state senator who also happened to be the best man at our wedding. Even one of the girlfriends who accompanied me to the free clinic that day many years ago holds tightly onto her pro-choice views because she says she worried about me so much when I was in Mexico for my abortion. She was concerned that I would never come back. She erroneously thinks that if I would have had access to a legal abortion in Minnesota at the time, all would have been well. I've been told I was privileged to have been able to abort my baby because of having the funds and a plan to carry it out, and then be able to continue on with my successful life as they see it. Suggesting an hypocrisy on my part for now being part of a movement that is trying to deny that benefit to others, particularly poor minority women. I was heartened recently to read an article by Gloria Purvis, a notable African-American media host, which pushes back on that mindset, entitled, "Stop Framing Abortion as the Solution to Black Women's Problems." Another thing I often hear, and I agree with, women will continue to get abortions even if they are illegal. But I believe making them less easily accessible will give women more time to really think about what they are doing and will hopefully make men more responsible in regards to the encounter that might result in a pregnancy. And this is not an endorsement, but since Roe was reversed, there's been an exponential increase in the demand for birth control and vasectomies. Number 5, we should all know that generally, people who support abortion strongly believe they are doing the right thing, even the virtuous thing. Like the nurse with the note who ran after me in the parking lot of the free clinic in 1970. And the young people in my life who grew up with Roe always being the law of the land. Because abortion was legal their entire lifetime, they believe it is moral, so are now outraged at losing what they consider a constitutional right. Some of them are angrily protesting. Others are offering to house and to pay travel expenses for complete strangers seeking to procure abortion in a state where it will remain legal. And I know Illinois will be a destination state, as will Minnesota. Companies are doing likewise for their workforce under the misguided assumption that doing so is in the best interest of their employees. I was recently viewing a young relative's wedding gift registry in anticipation of a marriage celebration tomorrow. And along with the possible choices of pots and pans, their guests were given the option of donating to an organization working hard to protect and expand abortion in Minnesota. Through gritted teeth, I chose a different present, of course, reminding myself that this couple must truly believe they are doing a good thing. And maybe someday I will have an opportunity to talk to them. Reactions to the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs reflect a polarized nation. The reversal of Roe v. Wade has solidified legal, political, medical, and personal battles across our country and in our families, which are likely to go on for years. As we enter into these very personal and passionate discourses, we need to do so with empathy, keeping in mind and heart how important it is for us not to vilify each other. That is the only way we will be able to have a civilly public or charitably private conversation with loved ones about this issue. In the hope of bringing light into the cultural darkness of abortion, as Christians, we need to remember that it is more about saving souls than winning arguments. As I end, I want you to know that I am truly at peace with everything I have shared with you today, especially because through my healing and stronger faith life, my husband, who ran as a pro-choice politician in his day, came to believe in God and entered into the Catholic Church before he died 2 years ago. At his confirmation, one of the things he attributed his conversion to, and always the politician, he actually gave a speech at his confirmation. What he attributed his conversion to was my work with Rachel's Vineyard and the community he got to know and their commitment to the pro-life cause. Thank you for listening, and God bless.